morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Wanted to talk about domestic violence. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I wanted to talk about domestic violence. I think it's very important. I mean, to talk about some important things, domestic violence, to just make people aware of what's going on in today's society. And we see it today. And I've been trying to think about this to come out and talk about it because it's so important and we don't talk about it enough. And good morning, good morning. And we see a lot of domestic violence that happens in the Black communities, and it's on the rise. It has increased. And we see a lot of women, and I would say maybe Generation Zs and some millennials, but mainly Generation Zers that are being abused, domestic violence, being killed at the hands of their perpetrator. And it's so important to understand domestic violence. So I wanted to talk about it, and I hope that others will come and join in this discussion. So let's explore some things about domestic violence and battered women. And I'm going to be coming from getting some information so people understand it's not just my opinion about domestic violence, but I'm going to be coming from uh, Dr. Charles Zastrow and Dr. Kirst-Ashman. And the reason why I like to do that is because a lot of times people have opinions and we think we understand what, domestic violence is. But when we really talk about domestic violence, there are some things that we need to understand, or the public that are not aware need to understand. And then I'll touch based on what a victim advocate is and the qualifications of a victim advocate, because some people out here are saying that they are advocating for women, but yet and still there are qualifications to be an advocate for women when it comes to rape victims or domestic violence. So it is important for us to discuss, get into this conversation. So one of the things that's talked about domestic violence and battered women is there are some terms that are associated with, like such as wife beating, include domestic violence, family violence, spouse abuse, and battered women. And again, it doesn't have to be a spouse. It could be a live-in partner. It could be a girlfriend or a boyfriend that's being battered or abused. And battering is a catch-all term that includes, but not limited to, physical abuse that may involve slapping, punching, knocking down, choking, kicking, hitting with objects, threatening with weapons, stabbing, and shooting, and emotional abuse that involves the instillment of fear, oppression, and control of the victim. And the battered women syndrome implies the systematic and repeated use of one or more of the above against a woman by her husband or lover. So it just doesn't have to be the husband, it can be the lover. And some of the myths, and let's talk about some of the myths because that's important to understand some of these myths about domestic violence and battered women. Some of the myths are this: battery is rare and infrequent, which is not true. Most of the time, it's an ongoing pattern. And so there's a behavior of the perpetrator. And battered women aren't really hurt that badly. Actually, they are hurt that badly. And I want you to know that I've experienced it. Not only have I experienced it with my friends and some people that are very close to me, including my mother when she was younger, and she shared her story with me. So I want people to understand domestic violence and battered women is very serious in this society. And we want to be equipped and have the correct understanding of what domestic violence is and battered women, so that we can be able to understand why, and we'll get to that too, why the woman may not leave, because it's not as simple as people understand it to be why they don't leave. And it's also a matter of self-determination. And no matter, what you say or do, they are going to leave when they're tired of not living, when they're tired of being beat on, when they're tired. That's usually when a domestic violence victim will leave. So getting back to the myths about it, beatings and other abuses just happen. They aren't a regular occurrence. That's not true either. A lot of times it's a regular occurrence, and it could be as simple as dinner wasn't on the table on time, or um, you know you didn't make their coffee hot enough, things like that. It can happen like that. And battered women ask for it. They ask for it because, this is a myth too. Well, they asked for it because they didn't do what I said, or they wasn't cooperative, or they didn't give me what I wanted, or they didn't answer the phone when I called them. There's a lot of different reasons that the perpetrator will accuse and blame, right, and blame the woman. And then wife battering only occurs in lower class families, and that is not true. Domestic violence can happen in any class family, any social class family. Domestic violence can happen. A lot of times people don't even know when someone is suffering from domestic violence or a battered women syndrome. You can have all the money, you can look fine and drive a sharp car and live in a wonderful neighborhood and still be suffering from the domestic violence. And most victims don't want to know that they're suffering from it. They don't want others to know that they're suffering, and they will even put on makeup to cover up bruises, especially if they have a black eye, or they might put on lipstick, and they will tell people, oh, I fell down, oh, I ran into a wall, oh, I hit my lip, things like that, or I poke my eye. Those are things like that that women will cover up when they are ashamed of being battered by their spouse or their partner or lover. And most people say partner now. And so it takes initiative and courage to muster the self-confidence required to leave a painful situation and strike out for the unknown. It takes confidence, self-confidence. And that's the thing, because a lot of times the victim is not confident in leaving. The unknown is frightening. They don't know where they're going to go. They don't know how they're going to eat. They don't know what they're going to do. If they leave and don't have money, they don't have a job, or they have small children, they don't want to wind up homeless. So they don't know, and they're afraid to leave, and they're frightened by the unknown. But at least if the domestic violence survivor remains in the home, she knows she has a place to stay. And that's the other thing. I don't know, it's like they may say, I don't know where I'm going to go, or my family turned their back on me, or my family are not going to welcome me back in. My family's angry with me because they knew that I was with this person, and my family didn't really want me to be with that person. So sometimes families do turn their back on the victims. And that's a sad case, but it's true. It happens across America. It can happen anywhere. And so often it takes 5 to 7 attempts at leaving an abuser before a survivor permanently succeeds. Because sometimes they'll leave. Sometimes they'll leave. But if they do leave, they usually will return back to their perpetrator, to their abuser. And that's why it's saying that it takes 5 to 7 attempts, because they can leave and come back and forth, because the abuser, their perpetrator, will say, I'm going to change. I'll never do it again. I won't hit you no more. I won't hurt you no more. I'm going to change. I'm sorry. I just got angry. Or you made me angry. It was your fault. They blame the victim over and over and over. And so it takes 5 to 7 attempts, or maybe even more at this point, at leaving before they actually succeed. And sometimes they try to leave and the person grabs them back, and they're chasing them across a roadway or a field. And I knew someone that tried to leave their abuser, and they were out in the country and they were running across a field, and they caught up with them and they dragged them back. So it is very important to understand what domestic violence is. And they have a lack of power, a lack of power. A battered woman views herself as having significantly less power in her relationship with an abusive man than does a woman with a partner who is nonviolent. See, women that have self-confidence and that are secure within themselves, they are, if they're in a relationship with a nonviolent person, they're more empowered. But if the woman is in an abusive relationship, she has less power. She doesn't have the empowerment that another woman has that's in a non-abusive relationship. Battered women see their relationships as almost completely dominated by the perpetrator. So whatever that they do is like they have to get permission. They are being dominated on every level and every side. They may not even be able to get up and go to the bathroom without asking, can I go to the bathroom? Or I'm going to take a shower, or I want to go eat. They are a prisoner in their own home, or in the home of the perpetrator or the batterer. Batterers system, batterers systemically, their regimen of intimidation, criticism, and violence, it places women in a vulnerable and difficult position. But however, it should be noted that even in the face of such adversity, which for many is daily torture, these women utilize their strengths. And so there are women that will utilize their strengths to stay there. And that's the thing. You have to be a strong woman to stay in a domestic violent situation, because you are being beat every day, and there's a lot of occurrences that happen, and it's a psychological, emotional abuse, including mental. And people don't understand, but even emotional, even abuse can be spiritual, because if they stop you from worshiping, if they stop you from your beliefs or believing in Jesus Christ or whatever your beliefs are, they can still that can still be a form of abuse when they're manipulating you and preventing you from even reading the Bible. There go that good book again. And they may even throw it on the floor and burn it or tear it up, because they don't want you to find strength in the word of God. And so there is also a spiritual abuse that goes on with domestic violence. And then it's the fear of the abuser. They are afraid of their abuser. And it is logical for battered women to fear brutal retaliation by the perpetrator if she leaves him. That is logical. A lot of battered women, they fear their abuser. They fear that they're going to come and look for them. And sometimes they do. When I was in business college, there was a young woman, and I may have shared this story before, but there was a young woman that was being abused, and they had a child. And she put him out. She called the police. She filed a restraining order. But he showed up, even in spite of the restraining order. He showed up. He showed up in spite of the restraining order. And she was so afraid. And he was beating all on the windows. He was trying to get in, and she was so afraid. And she actually got back with him, and she shared her story. And when she came back to class the next day, or a couple of days, I think it was over the weekend. And when she came back to class that Monday, she had a black eye. And me, I asked her because she sat next to me in my class, and I asked her, what happened, and she told me that her, her abuser did it, and I felt bad for her, and I told her that, we love you, God loves you, He values you, and you don't have to put up with that. And she understood that, and she appreciated the love that we gave her, to embrace her, because that's important, to let domestic violence victims know, battered women, that they are loved and they're valued, and that they don't have to put up with it. But the thing is, you can't make them leave. And that's their right to self-determination. Even when they come in for counseling, you cannot make them leave. Even if the situation looks dire to a counselor or to a victim's advocate, you can't make them leave. They have a right to determination, self-determination. And when they're ready to leave, they will leave. Even if you don't agree with them staying, they have that right to leave. And that's why when you call the hotlines, a lot of times they tell you, have the victim call, because until the victim is ready to leave or to call, it's up to the victim when they're tired and when they're ready to leave. They can't help you, the victim, through you. Not like that. And that's why it's so difficult. Like, if you want to call on behalf of someone, the hotline, it's hard for them, because they'll tell you, have the victim to call. I experienced that with a good friend, and I called several times, and they did tell me, have her to call. And she got up enough strength and courage to call, and I told her, hey, I'm your friend. I'll walk you through it. I'll be there. I'll hold your hand. I'll go with you to court. And that's the thing. We have to be supportive, because a lot of times we're on the outside looking in. And so we have to be able to embrace the victim and let them know that we're there for them. And so it is logical for them to fear the retaliation. And then a man who has dealt with stress by physical brutality might do so again if his female partner leaves him. So if he's used to abuse, if he's used to being hurt himself and bullied, he's a broken man. He's broken. And we're talking about right now females, but it can happen to men too, where the women is the aggressor in the relationship. But if a man is broken and he's been dealt a bad hand and he's been hurt and bullied, and he didn't feel like he had the love of his mother, or his mother broke his heart at a young age, sometimes that brutality spills over into adulthood, and they never get the counseling and the help they need, and so they take it out on their partners. And a battered woman might even fear death at the hands of an abandoned male partner. So one myth is that battered women stay in their relationships because they like being beaten. And that is a myth. That is such a myth. Who does that? Who likes being beaten? No one likes being beaten. But I tell you, you have to have self-determination to want to leave and to be able to have fight or flight, to fight back, to get away from your abuser or perpetrator. And so that's not true about them, like, wanting to be beat, and they like it. And for reasons discussed here, they tolerate their circumstances in order to survive. And I just want to share a story with you. This is from The Woman Who Walked Into Doors. This is what she describes it like being as under an abuser's partner's thumb. It says, for 17 years, there wasn't one minute I wasn't afraid, when I wasn't waiting for him to go, waiting for him to come, waiting for the fist, waiting for the smile. I was brainwashed and brain dead, a zombie for hours, afraid to think, afraid to stop, completely alone. I sat at home and waited. I mopped up my own blood. I lost all my friends and most of my teeth. He gave me a choice, left or right. I chose left, and he broke the little finger on my left hand. Because I scorched one of his shirts, because his egg was too hard, because the toilet seat was wet, because he demolished me. He destroyed me. And getting back to this story, the toilet seat being wet probably wasn't even her fault. But because it was wet, because sometimes abusers will do things to provoke, and then they will blame the victim. And then there's guilt involved. Many battered women feel it's their own fault that they are abused. A lot of women feel like, I wasn't good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I didn't clean up enough. Good morning. Okay. Have a blessed day. Thanks for stopping by and coming into the chat. I appreciate it. They think that, they're not good enough. They are not pretty enough. Or they just can't do things correctly. And so they blame themselves. They tend to believe in men being the dominant decision makers and leaders of the family. And that woman should be submissive and obedient. And that's the thing, because you have the marriage, and I'm going to say this, like the institution of marriage, where people in the institution of marriage, that's what you see a lot of. But in the biblical marriage, there's a covenant between two partners, in there. But in the institution of marriage, it's the dominant partner, which usually is the man. And to some extent, this guilt may be due to their husbands telling them that they're to blame for causing trouble. And that's what I was just saying. And perhaps because of the woman's low self-esteem, it's easy for them to be critical of themselves because they already have low self-esteem. And their beliefs in traditional gender role stereotypes may cause them to wonder how they have failed in their nurturing role of a wife or even a partner, if you're cohabitating, even with a partner. And they feel isolated with nowhere to go. Battered women often try to keep the facts of their battering a secret. They may feel isolated from friends and family. Frequently, The perpetrator strongly discourages his female partner's interactions with friends and family, and he criticizes them. He makes it as difficult as possible for her to communicate with them. He gradually gets her to cut off others. When the abuser becomes everything to the survivor, losing him means that she will be all alone. And that's important. And let's stop right there because that happens a lot with the abuser. They will get you to cut off, and that's what I was saying earlier, to get you to cut off your friends and your family. They will isolate you. They don't want you to go and be with your friends and family. They even will cut off phone communication. And if they see you get on the computer, maybe on Facebook or somewhere, social media to try to, or through email, they even will stand in the way of that. And they may even steal your passwords and make you turn over your passwords so they can check up on you to see what you're doing and who you're communicating with. Again, they will cut off every interaction that you have with your friends and family to keep you from having any interaction of the outside world. They want you to depend solely on them. And when you do that, then you will feel alone and have nowhere to turn, what I was saying earlier, because you may feel that your family doesn't want to have anything to do with you. And the perpetrator may even tell you that your family don't want you. They don't love you. They think you're dead, or they wish dead upon you. They don't care about you. They will tell you those things and put those things. Good morning, one pal. Good morning, welcome in the chat. And they will tell you those things to keep you from leaving or to keep you from communicating with your family. They will tell you all types of things to keep you from leaving. And that's what happens and when you get 100% dependent on your perpetrator or abuser, then you do feel like you have nowhere to turn. And that's the lie that they tell you, because most family members want you to come back. They want you, they want to see you, they want to know you're okay. But the abuser will try to prevent you from reaching out to your family. And then if there's children involved, they fear for their children. A battered woman usually fears for her children's safety. First, she might be worried about her ability to support them financially on her own. Because if she's been solely dependent upon her abuser, then she probably doesn't have any money or finances of her own. And one of the things is, too, if they had a job, the abuser can get them to quit their job, and they may quit the job because they are tired of going to work late, or they're tired of or the abuser interfering in them getting to work, or they'll keep them in the house, or they'll try to have sex with them to keep them from going to work or getting to work on time. And then the battered woman might even be afraid to go to work, and she's embarrassed and humiliated and ashamed because she's been abused so much, and she may have a black eye or bloody nose and bruises, and she doesn't want her coworkers to see that and to ask questions. And if you're working in customer service in front of the public, most of the time you can't be in front of people looking that way. And so therefore she might wind up without a job that she might have had when she got involved with the perpetrator. And so second, she may firmly adhere to the belief that children need a father. And I knew someone that was in an abusive relationship, and they wanted their father, the children's father, involved. And, they didn't want to leave, and so they stayed even though they were being abused. And then children can start asking for their father. I want daddy and daddy, and that kind of touches women's heart, and they stay because of that. But understand something, that as a woman, we understand that children need their father. But if you are being abused and beaten, you are no good to anyone, and even your children. You have to survive to raise your children and to shield them and to protect them and take care of them. And if you're in an abusive relationship and it's violence like that, then you are no good to your children, and they can even turn around and harm the children. And we see that so much today, where perpetrators are even killing babies and children because they are an abuser to the woman. And if the woman tries to leave, they take it out on the children. And so she may think that a father who abuses his wife is better than no father at all. And I want to say, I don't think that's, I beg the difference, but that's what they think. And so they stay. And third, she may even fear losing custody of her children, because if she doesn't have income, she may believe that the courts are not going to award her children. And if the abuser has some type of authority over her, or he can manipulate the system, then he sometimes can get in there and influence the judicial system, where she loses custody of her children. And if anyone have heard the story about Elizabeth Broderick, Betty Broderick, that killed her former husband and his new wife at the time. I was living in San Diego when this happened. And the thing is a lot of people don't know the whole story about it. A friend and I, we used to walk the lake every weekend and during the week. So we did like 3 times a week. We walked the lake, and it was the talk of the lake about Betty Broderick and her husband at the time, and he was a high profile attorney. And I'm telling you this story because there can be an influence in the judicial system to where the perpetrator can influence others and uh interfere and hinder the victim from getting the legal services that they need. And so her husband he raised through the ranks as a high profile attorney, and he was over the San Diego Bar Association. And so he had an influence with other attorneys. And so he hindered her from getting the legal counsel and services she needs. He stopped, a lot of things that, stopped a lot of things. And so all I'm saying is that they can have an influence. And so the abuser may threaten to take her children away. She may have little knowledge of the complicated legal system and may believe that he can and will do it. And that's something that can happen. Like I was just sharing about the Betty Broderick story, and a lot of people don't know the whole story about that situation. But they look at it and say she killed people. I don't agree with the killing, but you don't know the situation that he put her through and what she went through and how her children were taken. But she helped put this man through medical school, and she helped put him through legal school. She helped put him through. She took care of those children and the home while he was going to school. See, people don't know the whole story about it, and they want to paint this picture. But again, she is in prison. She's incarcerated at the Women's, Institute. But however, domestic violence can turn deadly. And when a woman or a man feel like they don't have nowhere else to turn, it can become violent. But however, domestic violence is very serious. It's very serious. And, women will stay because they love, they love, and I say this again, they love their batterer, because it maybe didn't even start out as domestic violence. And so they fell in love and they got together, but then they still feel love or emotional attachment to their abusive husbands. They may even say, well, when they're not hitting on me, they can be this great person. They really have a good heart. How many of you have heard victims talk like that, or someone that that were in an abusive relationship say, yeah, but they're not really like that. They just got angry. It sounds like they're making excuses, but they still love them. And many who seek help would prefer to remain in their relationship if the battering could be stopped. And that's the important thing that we as women and even others need to understand, that they want to stay. And that's the self-determination. That's where self-determination comes in at. Because because a victim will want to stay. You can't make them leave. And they feel like, well, if they will just stop the abuse, if they would stop hitting me, if they would stop battering me, then I want to stay in the relationship. And so, and then you got it was one older woman, and I'm going to share this. Walker cited that one older woman's reaction to the death of her husband, who had battered her throughout their 53-year marriage. The woman stated, "We did everything together. I loved him. Even when he was brutal and mean, I'm sorry he's dead. Although there were days when I wish he would die. He was my best friend. He beat me right up to the end. It was a good life, and I really do miss him. And we asked the question, how can that be a good life when someone's beating on you, when they're brutal to you? We asked the question, how can that be a good life? But to the victim, they believe it was still a good life because they loved them to the end and they had an emotional attachment to their batterer, to their perpetrator, to their abuser. And so uh, battering does not occur only in heterosexual relationships. It can occur in lesbian and gay relationships. And that's important. And so I'm going to stop right there because I don't really want to touch on, you know, the other relationships because sometimes people get offended. But however, good morning, Block. How you doing? Welcome to the chat. We're talking about domestic violence and battered women. We're talking about that. And so the thing is that as a battered woman, as we talked about that, you know, there is help. But again, you know, when we look at the situation and we ask the question, why don't they just leave? They must like being hit. How come they just didn't, you know, just get up and walk away? It really is not that easy for them to get up and walk away. As I shared some different examples that I was sharing before in some of my videos about how they feel, and this is really something that's important. And years ago, when I was when I had first went back to college, I wrote a paper about domestic violence because, like I shared with some of you, that I have a good friend that was in a domestic violence relationship, and I wrote a paper, and you know, victims, they a lot of times believe that their perpetrator will suffer more in the hands of the judicial system. And so they don't want to report it. They don't want to turn them in because they know that, you know, they'd rather have them in the home and say, well, you know what? I don't want them to go to jail. I don't want them to be prosecuted. So they won't turn them in because we see how our judicial system is even today. It just didn't start like that with the judicial system prosecuting men and giving them harsher sentences for whatever the crime may be. So they may look at it as he didn't mean it. He didn't mean to hit me. We just had a fight. You know, it wasn't that bad. So they don't report their perpetrator and they stay. But you know, if they choose to leave, what happens is it's not that easy for them because the perpetrator can come back and seek them out and look for them. And they're constantly looking over their shoulder. And that's the thing that we need to understand about domestic violence and victims that are subjected to this, because they are going to have a harder time when they leave. But they have to understand from advocacy points and from people that care about them that it may be hard now. And you may feel like you're suffering hardships now, but you left. That takes strength. And you have your life, and you have your whole life ahead of you, and you can get through it. And if it takes you a lifetime of counseling, we're here for you. And that's why it's so important to let a victim know we're here for you. We'll hold your hand through the process. If you know someone that's your friend that's going through it, let them know that you love them and that God values them and they're worth something. They're worth it. You're worth every bit of your own life. You're worth it to live your life. You're worth it to have happiness. You're worth it. You're worth it to be with someone that's going to love you and lavish you and protect you and shower you with love and to be there with you, not somebody that's going to beat on you and keep you from your friends and family. And an abuser will keep you from your friends and family. That's not love. And they don't understand that a lot of times, but they're afraid. So when you ask the question, why don't they just leave? Because they're afraid to leave. And they know the consequences if they leave. They know the consequences if they report it. And again, it's self-determination. But they will leave when they are tired of it. They will leave when they feel that they have a way out. And sometimes victims, if he just can go to work. And if you are there and say, you know what, when they get ready to go to work, we got you. If you're ready to leave, we got you. I've seen it where victims were ready to leave. And soon as their perpetrator, their abuser went to work, they put them in that car. They got them in the car and rushed them in the car. See, those are the things that can be done when you know that a victim, you know someone that's in a situation, to be there for them. Don't turn your back on them. Don't talk about them in a negative way. You know, speak peace, speak love. Let them know you love them. Let them know you're there for them. Let them know that they're valued and that they don't have to take this and they don't have to put up with this. They need a lot of support. And there's sources for victims, shelters, and you have to be careful, because if the perpetrator know that they're talking to someone that's giving them resources to empower them, they can beat them up even more, and it can result even to lead to death. So you got to work very carefully to provide information to the victim when they want to leave, to make sure that the perpetrator doesn't know what her plans are and her intentions are. You don't want the perpetrator to know those things, because they will try to interfere and come after them, and they will even hurt them even more. And so it's so important to, like I said, to offer support and to empathize and express genuine concern, and to not go around talking about the victim in a negative light, but letting that victim know that you support them, that you care about them, that they're valued, that God loves them, even in spite of what's going on. You are valued and worthy of everything that God has for you. Exactly. That's true. That's true. But there's a lot of there's a lot of there's a lot of batterers out there, perpetrators or abusers, that they don't know how to love. And that's one of the things I talked about in my video on servanthood. If you hate yourself, you're going to hate others. How can you love others if you hate yourself? And that's the thing. A lot of times you will see that there's something in an abuser that has triggered them. And like I said earlier, it could be a childhood situation where they were bullied, they were beat up, or they didn't have a family, or their mother broke their heart at a young age. And that's important to understand when it comes to boys. Boys usually get an attachment to their mothers, and mothers love their sons. But we have to have exactly, we have to have appropriate love towards our sons. As mothers, we need to be able to have appropriate love towards our sons, because when you break a boy's heart at a young age, some of them never recover from that, and they take it into adulthood, and even if they see abuse and they see their father abusing the mother, that's what they see. And children live what they learn. So if they see this, they learn that this is how it goes in a relationship, to beat on a woman, to beat her into submission, and to beat her to where she's going to obey and do what I say, not what other people say, but what I say. And then if they see, I don't want your family interfering, then they will make it even harder for the woman in the relationship. And so when a man has not been given the proper love and nurturing as a child, and their heart has been broken in some kind of way, because sometimes women, mothers will be on drugs or alcohol, and they will put the men or whatever they're doing, they'll put their drugs or that stuff before their children. And boys, even young women are affected, but boys are affected too. And they're affected in a different way a lot of times than females are. So they grow up seeing all of that, and they have never recovered from it. And so then when they do get in a relationship, they don't know how to love and be in a relationship a healthy relationship. They don't know how to love healthily. And they figure, let me beat on her to get her what I want her to do, and then apologize later. And that's the thing too, is they'll come back and say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. I'll never do it again. But you made me do it. And it just takes things like, my coffee wasn't hot enough, or my eggs was cold, or they wasn't fixed the way I wanted them to, or my toast wasn't dark enough, or it was burnt. It's little things that will trigger their abuser or perpetrator to go off on their partner or their wife. And so it's important to, when you are raising young men, if you're still raising young men, my son is an adult, but if you're still raising young men, it's important to love them, but to have that healthy love and still be able to discipline them in a manner and sit down and talk to them about what's right and what's wrong and what's appropriate, and to teach them to be the man that God has ordained for them. Because see, God already has a purpose for each and every one of our lives. And so it's important. If you don't believe in God, I don't know how to you know tell you, except for there's morals and values. But I believe in Christ. So I'm going to share that, taking them to church, reading the Bible with them, having that study time as a family, sitting down at the dinner time when you can and talking to them and asking them how their day would. Is anything going on? And letting young boys know it's okay to cry when they're hurting, because that's another thing too, is that it's like, well, you can't cry, you're a man. And we do want our young men to be men and man up and be strong, but we have to also let them grieve or to cry and to hug them and say it's okay. We need to have that nurturing love, that healthy love, where they still grow up to be the man that God has called them to be, as ordained them. Because when you go back and look at Genesis, and you think about Adam and Eve, and you think about Eve was over there being entertained by the serpent, and then Adam didn't even step up. He bit off the fruit when he shouldn't have. He should have been the man then and said, no, this is what God told us to do, is to not eat from that tree. And so Adam should have been that man. And we see today a lot of men are not being the men that God already ordained, and a lot of families are broken. But we can get back to where we need to be. We can, but it's going to take some time for our community. But we don't want to sit back and watch things that go on, and we don't want to have a voice. We need to have a voice, and we need to do it in the way that's going to get results. We need to do it in a way that's going to really impact and help other people. And so with that being said, I know that there's a lot of domestic violence and a lot of abuse, and a lot of things we've seen of babies being killed. I watched the APC podcast, and he shows a lot of videos. That's his main goal on his channel, is to show videos of women being in domestic violence situations with men, and children are being killed at the hands of the perpetrator, because the woman either didn't want to go along with it, she was tired of putting up with it. And that's where that the victim needs so much support, and there's been a lot of talk around social media about domestic violence, and so I wanted to bring this commentary to to put that out there, to understand what a victim is definitely going through. And it's easier said than done. It's easier said than done, excuse me. As far as them leaving. But some of us are not as strong as others. And I'm gonna keep it real with you. One time I was dating someone when I was much younger, and this man was, I found out that he was mm-hmm, yeah. Um I found out that he was a he wasn't he was doing things he shouldn't have been doing, and I wasn't going to go along with that. And there was a time that he was participating in I think he was doing some things that he shouldn't have been doing, and he went off. and we were supposed to go to this concert, and he didn't show up. And so I took the tickets, and me and a girlfriend went, an acquaintance, to this concert. So when he came back, he asked where his tickets were, and I told him that me and so went to the concert. So he got real angry, and he grabbed me. And this is a true story. I was in my 20s. He grabbed me in my young 20s, and he wouldn't let me go. And I told him, let me go. And he wouldn't let me go, and he threw me down. But I lived in an area, good morning, and I lived in downtown, and I remember, and I lived by myself, and so, like I said, he threw me down, he wouldn't let me go, and I knew in my heart, and this is keeping it real, I knew in my heart that it was either fight or flight. And so I used to keep a weapon under my pillow, and this is a true story. And so I pulled it out, and I told him, if you don't let me go, I'm going to stab you. And I had to, because it was a matter of fight or flight. And he was going to rape me, because he told me he was going to take back what I took from him, because me and the acquaintance went to the concert. And like I told him, you don't get to determine that type of control over me, because he went off and he was really with another woman. And then he comes back and he thinks that he's going to control this situation. And I refuse to allow him to control the situation. And this guy, I'm telling you, he stalked me forever. I moved and he stalked me. And and I remember when I moved, he found out where I was. And let me tell you something. That's why I'm telling you it's not as easy, because when I filed the restraining order against him, they couldn't serve him, because every time they tried to serve him, he ran off, and he had people protecting him. And that's another thing people need to understand. Sometimes perpetrators, the abuser, is being protected by family members or friends. And so they couldn't serve him. So he showed up one day at my apartment, and my neighbor, me and him was pretty tight. And he showed up, and he grabbed me, and we got to tussling, and we were up on a second floor level, and it was a rail there, and we got to fighting, because I'm telling you, it's fight or flight. And I'm telling you that we got to fighting, and I wind up getting the upper hand, and I had him hanging over the rail, like trying to make him go over the rail. And my neighbor came out, and he says, don't do it, Reen, don't do it, Reen, don't do it, Reen. And something in me heard him. At first, I didn't hear it, because when you're in that moment of adrenaline, you don't hear people talking to you. And my whole goal was to live for Shireen, and to live for me. And so my whole goal was that. And so finally, I heard somebody in my ear, and I let him go, and he ran off. He stole my car. I was at work. He stole my car. He did all types of stuff. I mean, I'm telling you, it's not that easy. So, but yet and still, you got to have a determination to want to live. And you know, I was even offered a 25. Everybody know what that is. Um, you know, and I turned it down. But I was offered that, because my perpetrator wouldn't leave me alone, because I told him I don't live that type of life. And the things you're doing, I won't support that. And so he was angry that I chose to end the relationship. And so he came after me so many times. Um, but I'm telling you, I had the desire to live, and I had the desire to not be controlled. And that's the thing. Everybody is not that strong. And, but for me, being that things had happened to me before, and I just said that never again is anyone gonna, you know, do what they're not. And so for me, it was a matter, like I said, of fight or flight. And so, thank you, thank you. And so, you know, when I talk about things and talk about my relationship with Christ, I talk about those things because I've experienced a lot of things, and I thank God each and every day that he has not made me bitter in spite of everything I've went through, because I don't believe that every man is guilty when a woman accuses them. You got to be fair and just. And you know, God is a fair and just God, but at the same time, if you know your own story and you've experienced it and you're being truthful about it, then you are going to be fair and just in your own heart, and you want justice and you want to see the truth, but you will protect yourself when needed. And sometimes, like I said, everybody is not that strong, and so um, we have to pray for those victims that haven't left their perpetrator, that are not strong. We have to pray for them, but again, they have to want to leave, and they got to have that self-determination to leave. And they have to know that they're valued and they're loved. And they got to know that their life is worth saving, and believe that just like the perpetrator believed their life is worth something, they have to believe their life is worth that much more. And that's so important um, when you're dealing with domestic violence. And so I want to, before we end, I want to share with you some things, because I know some people had some concerns or questions about how can you be a advocate and say you are an advocate, but you don't have any type of credential. So I wanted to share with you what I've found, knowing what I know in my, profession. And then this: victim advocates are typically often found within a district attorney's office, and they can also be found in a nonprofit agency, who are concerned with rape victims or those who have been subjected to domestic violence. Um, Victim advocates, they work with victims to explain legal procedures. So that was one of the things that I mentioned before, I believe, in one of my videos. You need to know about legal procedures when you are working with victims. If you are a victim advocate, or you say you are, you need to know about legal procedures, um, resources, available resources, being able to encourage the victim and supporting them throughout the court process. They also try to minimize the physical and emotional consequences of the crime victim, because domestic violence is a crime. That is a crime. And see, years and years and years and years and years, I say decades ago, in the marriage of institution, they didn't look at it as that, and they didn't really help the woman. But it is a crime. And I want victims to know that domestic violence is a crime, and it can be reported, and they do need to be charged. The perpetrator, whatever you want to call them, the abuser, the perpetrator, they need to be charged when they are participating in domestic violence. And advocates may attend court at the victims and help them obtain court injunctions. Those are things that advocates can do. They have a specialization in sexual assault, stalking. They also perform administrative duties. They investigate complaints. That's important, to investigate complaints. Um, exactly. That's right. Exactly, one path. They also provide training to new staff, and it's ongoing training. That's the thing about the profession. You have to have ongoing training and know the new laws that are put in place, legal information, resources, what you can, what you can't. Those are things that are very, very important. But ongoing training is such an important thing, and having the latest resources and the latest research to be able to help domestic violence victims. And you can be employed at a hospital, community programs, or shelters. And then the other thing about the level of education, you can have an associate degree in the related field, also, or a certification. But a bachelor's degree is preferred. And your job skills would be compassionate communication, good problem solving skills, good ability to work as a team member of a team, and familiar with court procedures. So it's so important to know, if you are advocating and you say, I'm an advocate for women, then unless you really have those credentials, then really, what really are you doing? Because again, you have to investigate complaints. And that's some of the things that we've talked about in other, on other platforms, which is really, really good to be able to get information out there. And so um, with that being said, it's hard for me to accept people that come out, and I'm keeping it real, that come out and say, well, I'm an advocate for women. How are you an advocate for women if you don't provide your credentials? That's one thing that's important to know, that if you are an advocate for women, the one thing that you need to do if a client calls you or comes into your office or agency, you need to be able to tell them what your position is, and even your level of education, what you're certified in, what you're qualified in. You do not want to practice out of the scope of your ability or profession. And if it gets to a point where they're asking you things that that's out of your ability or profession, and you say, let me get someone else that can better assist you with that. And that's so important. So these people that are coming out saying, well, we're women advocates and I want to be an advocate for women, I just want to help women. We got to ask the question, what type of credentials do they have in doing that? Because I take domestic violence very serious. I take um, these type of things so serious and take it to heart, because when I've experienced it, and I've had what the story my mother shared with me, and friends, close friends that have went through it, for me, I take it to heart to know that we are doing the right thing on behalf of real victims, that we are, we're able to support them in the manner that we're supposed to, but we also have the knowledge, the tools, and the resources and the education to be able to do the best thing for the victim or the client, because we promise under my profession to do the client no harm. But we also believe that they have a right to self-determination. And the best thing we can do is be compassionate, be supportive, show them love, and let them know that they're worthy and they're valued, because we want you to live. Any victim out there, I'm saying, we want you to live. We want you to make it out safely. We want you to be able to live your life and have the right to pursuit of happiness like anyone else. And so we don't mock you. We love you. And we're here for you. And that's the thing that we want all victims to know. And if you're suffering from any type of domestic violence or emotional or mental or spiritual abuse, there is help for you. But you have to take that step, because we know it's not easy for you, but you have to be willing to take that step. And that's what I want to say to domestic violence victims, because there are real victims out here. We don't play games and say I'm a victim because I have a broken heart. That's not a victim because your heart is broken because the relationship didn't work out. You're not a victim just because you didn't get your way. And um, there are real victims out here that have suffered, excuse me, at the hands of their perpetrator, their abuser. They have suffered and they're still suffering. And so we don't take it lightly. But again, we want you to know that um, when you're ready, there's going to be someone there to catch you. When you're ready, there's going to be someone there to be there for you. You just got to find a way to reach out and talk to someone, because we understand that when you get that emotional attachment and the love for your perpetrator, it's hard to break away. But you can do it, because you have to want to survive and live for you. That's the thing. Live for you. And so it's getting to the root of the problem there. As I was saying, the perpetrators, they have an issue that they've never solved, and they've never got help themselves. And so they take it out on the victim. They take it out on their spouse, their girlfriend, their families. They take it out on them because they've never got the help they need to solve their own insecurities, because most perpetrators are insecure. Most of them, they lack secure within themselves, and they feel that hitting and violence is the answer, and that's not the answer. And you can't love God and hate your brother or sister. You cannot love God and hate your wife or your partner. That don't work. But as women, we have to protect ourselves and we have to know what we're getting into before we get into it. We have to be able to ask the right questions and have discernment about relationships and the people that we surround ourselves with and who we hang out with and who we let into our circle and into our homes. Right, right. And they still aren't healed, even though, yeah, they're not healed. Because if they were, they wouldn't be beating on other people and they wouldn't be, hurting other people and isolating them from their families. So I want to say thank you all for tuning in. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, and share the video. We need to be able to talk about domestic violence more often, and even just a level, putting out here a level of awareness um, on what happens, and the myths about domestic violence and why victims stay and how come they haven't left. And a lot of them do want to leave. And then some of them don't. They just want the violence or the abuse to stop, the battering to stop. They just want that to stop. But a lot of times that's not going to stop, because even if you've asked them and you've told them, I love you, just stop hitting on me, we can make it together, we can be together, they're not going to stop majority of the time unless they get help and get help on their own, because it's hard to put the domestic violence victim in the same room with thank you, you're welcome, thank you for stopping in and joining in. I truly appreciate you. um, Putting them in the same room together that don't work. That doesn't work. Usually the abuser needs to get help on their, get counseling and to attend counseling on their own, and the victim needs to be in counseling on her own. You can't do group counseling like that when there's such grievous abuse that's been going on, because the victim may not be able to share and everything and come forward, and that's hard because they may be uncomfortable. So and we have to understand that a lot of times they don't want God bless, thank you for stopping in, thank you so much, I appreciate you. And they don't want their abuser to go to jail. And if they know that their abuser already has a record, then they're probably going to go to jail if charges are filed. If they're already got some a criminal background of issues or open cases, stalking charges and all of that, then they don't want them to go to jail. But that's where they need to be. They need a cooling off period. They need counseling, therapy. They need those things, but they need to be away from the victim so they can't continue to hurt other people. And making threats and all of that is not the answer for a abuser or perpetrator. Excuse me, because eventually you are going to be taken down. Um, we stand in agreement with, stand in agreement with what's right. And we don't condone domestic violence on anyone, no matter if you are a man or woman. We don't condone domestic violence. And so, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and, get out of here in this live. But I truly appreciate everyone that has stopped by in the chat, has joined in, and I appreciate all your comments. And again, let's stay prayerful, prayerful for our leaders, prayerful for, the march that's coming up, prayerful for all the victims out there that have chose to leave, that have made it out safely, and the ones that are still there, and even the survivors and the ones that are doing big things in the community to help other victims, advocacy, and all those things. Thank you so much for everything that you do for everyone else. And a good leader is confident in the position that they serve in. They're not selfish and they're not overbearing, and they have a heart of servitude. God bless you all.